Cedar Creek, nestled in the heart of Oregon's rugged hills, was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone else. On most days, life followed an easy rhythm. Morning coffee at the diner, kids playing in the parks, and shopkeepers exchanging pleasantries on Main Street. For Elena Carter, life had settled into a routine after the loss of her husband 3 years ago. As the town's librarian, she spent her days surrounded by books and her evenings raising her 2 children, Sophie and Max. The tranquility of her life, however, was about to be shattered in ways she couldn't have imagined. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Elena took Sophie and Max to Whispering Pines Park. The sun filtered through the tall fir trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Max, 8 years old and brimming with energy, darted toward the jungle gym, while Sophie, only 6, trailed after him with her favorite stuffed bunny clutched in her arms. Elena settled on a bench near the playground, a book in her lap but her attention on her children. The sound of engines disrupted the peaceful scene. The low rumble began in the distance, growing louder and more ominous. Several parents turned their heads toward the source of the noise as a group of motorcycles roared into the parking lot. The riders, clad in black leather and heavy boots, exuded a rough and menacing aura. Elena's grip tightened on her book as the bikers dismounted, their leader scanning the park with cold, calculating eyes. He was a tall man with a shaved head and a tattoo of a coiled snake winding down his neck. His leather jacket bore the insignia of a fanged wolf, with the words Iron Fangs stitched beneath it. The bikers spread out, their presence unsettling the families in the park. Conversations stopped, and parents began gathering their children. Elena's heart raced as she called out to Sophie and Max, "Stay close to me." The leader of the bikers approached a group of parents huddled near the swings. His voice carried across the park. "We're here to talk about the future of Cedar Creek." Elena couldn't hear the full conversation, but the parents looked uneasy. One man stepped forward, his voice trembling. "We don't want any trouble here." "Trouble?" The biker leader chuckled. "Trouble finds its way to towns like this when people don't pay attention. We're offering protection. Keeps things quiet, safe. But that kind of peace isn't free." Elena's stomach churned as she realized what was happening. The Iron Fangs were extorting the town, using intimidation to force compliance. Sheriff Ethan Drake arrived minutes later, his SUV screeching to a halt near the park's entrance. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his 40s, Ethan had a reputation for being steady under pressure. He stepped out, adjusting his hat, and approached the bikers. "Afternoon," Ethan said, his tone calm but firm. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" The leader turned, his lips curling into a smirk. "Just enjoying the park, Sheriff. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Cut the act," Ethan replied. "This is a family park, not a place for your business. I suggest you and your boys move along." The tension thickened as the bikers stood their ground, exchanging glances. Finally, the leader laughed and motioned for his crew to leave. "We'll be seeing more of each other, Sheriff. This town has a lot to offer, and we're here to make sure it reaches its full potential." As the bikers rode off, Ethan turned to the parents, offering reassurance. "We'll handle this. Go home and stay safe." Elena gathered her children, her mind racing. This wasn't just a one-time encounter. The Iron Fangs had made it clear they were here to stay. That evening, Elena called her brother, Cole Daniels. Though he lived 2 states away, she knew she could count on him. A former Marine and survival expert, Cole had a knack for cutting through nonsense and solving problems. "I need your help," Elena said, her voice low to avoid waking the children. She recounted the events at the park, her fear palpable. "I'll be there by morning," Cole replied without hesitation. True to his word, Cole arrived the next day in his beat-up pickup truck. He was lean and strong, with the quiet confidence of someone who had seen more than most. As he stepped onto Elena's porch, he hugged her tightly. "We'll figure this out." Over coffee, Cole listened intently as Elena explained everything. "This isn't just about the park," she said. "The library has records of similar incidents in nearby towns. Gangs moving in, businesses being strong-armed. It always starts the same way, with a group demanding protection." Cole frowned. "And it's always the same gang?" "No," Elena replied. "That's the strange part. The gangs have different names. But there are always whispers about a group pulling the strings from behind the scenes. Something called the Circle. Cole leaned back, his eyes narrowing. I'll talk to the sheriff. See what he knows. The two siblings met with Ethan at the sheriff's office later that day. The sheriff admitted he'd heard rumors about the Circle, a shadowy organization rumored to control criminal networks across the region. But it's always been just that, rumors. No hard evidence, nothing we can act on. That's going to change, Cole said firmly. These guys made a mistake coming here. We need to find out why they're interested in Cedar Creek. Ethan nodded. We'll start with their movements. I've got a few trusted deputies who can help. But Cole, you need to be careful. These aren't petty criminals. As they left the office, Cole turned to Elena. This town isn't just a random target. There's something here they want. We need to figure out what it is before they make their next move. That night, as Elena tucked her children into bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that Cedar Creek's peaceful days were behind them. With Cole by her side, she felt a glimmer of hope, but the questions lingered. Who was the Circle, and what did they want with her town? The answers, she suspected, would change everything. Cedar Creek buzzed with unease after the Iron Fang's arrival. The once peaceful town now carried an undercurrent of fear, as though the bikers' presence had awakened something long buried. Elena could sense it everywhere. In the hushed conversations at the diner, the wary glances exchanged on Main Street, and the quiet dread in her children's eyes when they asked if the bad men would return. Cole Daniels, now firmly entrenched in the town's unfolding mystery, wasted no time. Early the next morning, he drove to the sheriff's office to meet Ethan Drake. The sheriff had set up a small command center in the corner of his station, a bulletin board covered with photos of the bikers, maps of their movements, and a few cryptic notes about possible connections to the Circle. This is what we know, Ethan said, gesturing to the board. The Iron Fangs are enforcing what they call a protection program. They've hit a few local businesses already, demanding payments, threatening property damage, standard racketeering. But there's something strange about their targets. Cole crossed his arms, studying the map. What do you mean? They're not hitting places you'd expect, Ethan replied. No banks, no high-traffic businesses. They're focusing on old properties, abandoned factories, storage facilities, even an old mining office on the edge of town. Cole frowned. What would a gang want with those? That's what we need to figure out, Ethan said. Meanwhile, Elena was digging into the town's history from her desk at the library. The more she researched, the more disturbing the patterns became. Cedar Creek's archives contained newspaper clippings and handwritten accounts dating back to the early 1900s. Each described strange occurrences, disappearances, unexplained tremors, and rumors of secretive groups operating under the town's surface. Elena came across an old ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle, documenting the activities of a long-defunct mining company. One entry caught her attention. July 14, 1945. The excavation reached the third chamber today. Strange readings from the equipment. Dr. Whitaker insists we continue, but the workers are uneasy. Something doesn't feel right. Below the entry, a note had been hastily scrawled. Containment protocols initiated. Containment? Elena's heart raced as she scribbled notes. The library's records hinted at something more than mining. She needed to know what they had uncovered beneath Cedar Creek all those years ago. That evening, Cole returned to Elena's house, finding her surrounded by stacks of old documents. She explained her discoveries, her voice laced with urgency. There's more to this town than anyone realizes, she said. Whatever they were mining in 1945 wasn't coal or iron. They found something else, something they tried to bury. Cole leaned forward, scanning the pages. And now someone's digging it back up? Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Ethan stood on the porch, looking grim. We've got trouble, he said. The trio drove to the edge of town, where one of the abandoned industrial sites sat in eerie silence. Ethan parked his SUV behind a line of trees, motioning for them to stay low. Across the lot, several figures moved under the dim glow of flashlights, bikers and men in tactical gear. Those aren't just bikers, Cole whispered. Ethan nodded. Mercenaries. I've seen that kind of precision before. These guys are professionals. The group watched as the men unloaded crates from a black truck. One of the crates fell, revealing what looked like high-tech drilling equipment. They're not just intimidating people, Cole said. They're looking for something. And it's not just about money. The next day, Cole and Ethan decided to question the owner of one of the businesses the bikers had targeted, a local hardware store run by a retired engineer named Frank Morrison. Frank was hesitant to talk at first, but after some coaxing, he shared what he knew. They didn't just want money, he said, his voice shaking. They asked about the building's history, wanted to know if there were any underground passages or old blueprints. Elena's heart sank. What did you tell them? I didn't know anything useful, Frank said, but they didn't believe me. Said they'd be back if I wasn't more helpful next time. Later that evening, Cole and Ethan decided to investigate one of the old industrial sites themselves. They parked a mile away and approached on foot, moving through the shadows. The site was partially fenced off, but the gate was unlocked, a sign that someone had been there recently. Inside, they found evidence of recent activity, footprints in the dirt, fresh tire tracks, and cigarette butts scattered near the entrance. The building itself was a crumbling shell, its windows shattered and its walls covered in graffiti. Cole noticed something strange near the back wall, a section of the floor that seemed newer than the rest. He knelt, brushing away dirt to reveal a faint seam in the concrete. This isn't just a floor, he said. It's a hatch. Before they could investigate further, the sound of engines echoed in the distance. Cole and Ethan scrambled to hide as several motorcycles pulled into the lot. From their vantage point, they watched as the bikers approached the hatch. One of them carried a key, which he used to unlock the hidden panel. The hatch opened with a metallic groan, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. What the hell is down there? Ethan muttered. The bikers disappeared into the hole, leaving 2 guards above. Cole motioned for Ethan to stay back as he crept closer, using the shadows for cover. He reached the ladder and peered down, his pulse quickening at what he saw. An underground passage lined with strange symbols etched into the walls, glowing faintly in the darkness. Cole retreated before he was spotted, rejoining Ethan. We need to get out of here, he said. And we need backup. Back at the sheriff's office, Cole shared what they had seen. This isn't just about a gang shaking down businesses, he said. This is organized. They're looking for something buried under Cedar Creek, and they're willing to tear the town apart to find it. Ethan nodded grimly. We'll need more than just a few deputies to stop this. Elena joined them, clutching the old ledger she had found. I think I know what they're after, she said, but it's worse than we thought. She pointed to a passage in the ledger describing the obelisk, an object discovered during the mining operation in 1945. The notes hinted at its power to manipulate reality, a power the miners had tried and failed to contain. Cole exchanged a look with Ethan. If they get their hands on it, this town won't just be in danger. It'll be destroyed. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they revealed was far more terrifying than any of them had imagined. Something buried beneath Cedar Creek was waking up, and the Iron Fangs weren't the only ones trying to claim it. The tension in Cedar Creek had grown so thick it was almost tangible. The Iron Fangs were no longer lurking at the edges of town. They were making their presence known. Every resident had either seen or heard of their intimidation tactics, and whispers of the circle were spreading like wildfire. But for Cole Daniels, Elena Carter, and Sheriff Ethan Drake, the time for whispers was over. After uncovering the secret hatch at the abandoned industrial site, Cole and Ethan returned to Elena's house to regroup. Elena had been combing through the old ledger and other historical documents, trying to piece together what the miners in 1945 had unearthed. They called it the obelisk, Elena said, pointing to a passage in the ledger. The miners described it as something ancient, something they couldn't explain. They tried to bury it after a series of accidents, but it seems like the circle didn't stop watching over it. Cole paced the room, his arms crossed. And now they're trying to dig it up. What's their endgame? Money? Power? It's not just that, Elena replied, her voice tinged with unease. There's something else in these records, a pattern. The circle isn't just looking for artifacts. They're controlling everything. Businesses, infrastructure, even local governments in towns like ours. Ethan leaned forward, his expression dark. So they're not just after the obelisk. They're using it as leverage, a way to keep people in line. And to expand their influence, Elena added. Cedar Creek isn't the first town they've targeted, but it might be the first where they've gotten this close to unearthing something dangerous. As the trio discussed their next move, the tension in the room was broken by the sound of a car pulling into Elena's driveway. Ethan peered through the curtains and sighed in relief when he saw a familiar face. Deputy Jessica Moore, one of his most trusted officers. Jessica entered the house, her face pale. Sheriff, we've got a problem. I've been following up on some of the properties the Iron Fangs have been targeting, and I found something strange. Several of them were purchased years ago under shell companies that all lead back to the same name, the Circle Trust. Cole frowned. They've been planning this for years. Jessica nodded. And it gets worse. I checked old town plans and geological surveys. Those properties are all connected by underground tunnels. Tunnels that lead to the industrial site you just investigated. Elena gasped. The miners must have built those tunnels as part of the containment effort in 1945. Or as part of whatever project they were working on, Ethan said grimly. The group decided to split up. Elena would stay at the library, continuing her research. Jessica would compile the evidence they had so far to send to federal authorities. Meanwhile, Cole and Ethan would return to the industrial site to investigate further. That night, as Cole and Ethan crept through the darkened streets of Cedar Creek, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The quiet was oppressive, broken only by the occasional distant roar of a motorcycle. When they reached the industrial site, the hatch they had discovered earlier was still ajar. Cole motioned for Ethan to follow as they descended the ladder into the tunnel below. The air grew colder as they moved deeper underground. The walls of the tunnel were etched with strange symbols, faintly glowing in the dim light of their flashlights. Cole ran his fingers over the markings. These weren't made by the miners, he said. This is something else. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. Let's keep moving. The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. At its center was a stone pedestal, surrounded by equipment that looked far too advanced for the miners of 1945. What is this? Ethan whispered. Before Cole could answer, voices echoed through the chamber. The two men ducked behind a stack of crates as a group of mercenaries entered, led by a man in a tailored suit. His presence exuded authority, and his voice carried the weight of command. Victor Grayson, Ethan murmured. I've heard of him. Former intelligence officer turned private contractor. If he's here, this is bigger than we thought. Grayson approached the pedestal, where a cylindrical object rested, a containment vessel. He turned to his men. The artifact is responding to the containment grid. The energy readings are increasing. We're ahead of schedule, but we can't afford any mistakes. The Circle expects results. Cole and Ethan exchanged a glance. This was the confirmation they needed. The Circle was pulling the strings, and Victor Grayson was their enforcer. The two men retreated the way they came, narrowly avoiding detection. When they emerged from the tunnel, they found themselves surrounded by several bikers. Looks like you boys took a wrong turn, one of them sneered. Cole didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, catching the biker off guard with a swift punch. Ethan drew his sidearm, leveling it at the others. Back off, or you'll regret it. The bikers hesitated, clearly weighing their odds. Before they could decide, the roar of another engine interrupted them. A motorcycle skidded to a stop, and a tall woman with dark hair and a scar across her cheek dismounted. Stand down, she ordered. The bikers immediately complied, their deference clear. She approached Cole and Ethan, her piercing gaze scanning them. My name's Riley, she said. I don't work for the Circle anymore, but I know what they're capable of. If you're trying to stop them, we need to talk. Back at the sheriff's office, Riley explained her defection. The Iron Fangs think they're running the show, but they're just pawns. The Circle uses groups like them to do their dirty work, then cuts them loose when they're no longer useful. What do they want with the obelisk? Cole asked. Riley hesitated. Control. The Circle believes the artifact can bend reality, reshape it to their will. They've been searching for artifacts like it around the world, but this is the first time they've gotten this close to activating one. Ethan leaned forward. And what happens if they activate it? Riley's expression darkened. If they succeed, Cedar Creek won't survive. The artifact's energy, It's unstable. It could tear this town apart. The group fell into silence, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Finally, Cole stood. Then we stop them, he said. Whatever it takes. As the others nodded in agreement, Elena entered the room, clutching a map. I found something in the archives. These tunnels, they don't just connect the town. They're part of a larger network, one that's been influencing Cedar Creek for decades. The realization hit them all at once. The Circle's control wasn't just about the obelisk. It was about something much larger, something that could change everything. The battle for Cedar Creek was no longer just about protecting a town. It was about preventing the Circle from unleashing a force they barely understood. And as the first tremors shook the ground beneath their feet, Cole knew they were running out of time. The first tremors were subtle, a faint shudder beneath the surface of Cedar Creek, as though the town itself were holding its breath. But those who paid attention could sense it was only the beginning. For Elena Carter, Sheriff Ethan Drake, Cole Daniels, and their growing circle of allies, the tremors were a warning. Something buried deep beneath the town was stirring, and whatever it wasn't meant to be disturbed. The next morning, Elena woke to find her son, Max, sitting at the kitchen table, his face pale and his hands clutching a crayon so tightly that it snapped in half. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Elena asked, kneeling beside him. "I had a dream," Max said softly, "about the people in the tunnels." Elena froze. Max had no way of knowing about the tunnels. She hadn't told him or Sophie anything about the investigation. "What people, Max?" He hesitated, his small voice trembling. "They weren't like us. They were tall and shiny, like light. They were angry." Elena hugged him tightly, her heart pounding. The artifact's influence was reaching beyond the tunnels, seeping into the town. Across Cedar Creek, others reported similar experiences. Children described vivid dreams of events they couldn't have witnessed. Adults complained of déjà vu and strange whispers. Even Sheriff Drake admitted to seeing fleeting shadows out of the corner of his eye. By noon, Ethan had gathered the group at the sheriff's office. The atmosphere was heavy as Elena shared Max's dream. "He's not the only one," Ethan said grimly. "Half the town's been calling in strange reports all morning. Visions, voices, headaches. It's like the artifact is trying to tell us something, or warn us." Cole leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "It's more than that. Whatever's down there, it's affecting people's minds. The longer this goes on, the worse it's going to get." Jessica Moore, Ethan's deputy, entered the room with a laptop in hand. "You're not going to like this," she said, setting it down on the table. "I pulled surveillance footage from the industrial site. The artifact's energy output has doubled since last night. If it keeps escalating at this rate, we're looking at a full-scale event within 48 hours. "What kind of event?" Elena asked. Jessica hesitated. "Best case scenario, we're talking about localized tremors. Worst case, the energy destabilizes and takes the entire town with it." The room fell silent. "We can't wait for this thing to implode," Cole said. "We need to stop it before it reaches critical mass." "But how?" Ethan asked. "We don't even fully understand what it is, let alone how to contain it." It was Riley who broke the silence. "The Circle has been studying the artifact for decades. They must have something, plans, documents, anything that could tell us how to shut it down." Cole nodded. "Then we go back to the tunnels. Whatever they're hiding, we find it." That night, the group split into two teams. Cole, Ethan, and Riley would infiltrate the tunnels, while Elena and Jessica stayed at the library, continuing their research. As Cole and his team descended into the darkness, the air grew heavier, charged with an unnatural energy. The tunnel walls pulsed faintly, their strange symbols shifting like living things. "What is this place?" Riley muttered, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. "It's not just a tunnel," Cole said. "It's part of the artifact. The whole system is connected." They reached the central chamber, where the artifact sat in its containment vessel, glowing with an eerie light. The mercenaries they had seen before were gone, but the equipment remained. Computers, scanners, and monitors displaying incomprehensible data. Riley approached one of the terminals, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "These readings, The artifact is interacting with the containment grid, but not in the way they intended. It's feeding off it, growing stronger. Then we shut it down, Cole said. Before they could act, the ground shook violently, nearly knocking them off their feet. A deep hum filled the chamber, growing louder until it seemed to resonate in their bones. Riley gasped, staring at the artifact. It's reacting to something. Someone's trying to activate it. Back at the library, Elena and Jessica pored over the ledger and other documents. Elena's hands trembled as she uncovered a faded blueprint of the mining tunnels. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a marked area. This wasn't just a mine. It was a containment site. They built these tunnels to trap the artifact's energy, to keep it from spreading. Jessica frowned. And now the circle is reversing that. They're breaking the containment on purpose. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Something's happening. Be ready." As she read the message, the lights in the library flickered. A low, rhythmic pulse seemed to emanate from the ground, vibrating through the floorboards. "What is that?" Jessica asked, her voice tight with fear. Elena closed her eyes, a wave of dizziness washing over her. In her mind, she saw flashes of images, an endless void, shimmering figures, and a doorway of light. "Elena!" Jessica's voice snapped her back to reality. "I'm fine," Elena said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "But we need to get to the sheriff's office. Now." At the same time, in the tunnels, Cole and his team were forced to retreat as the artifact's energy grew unstable. The symbols on the walls blazed with light, casting the chamber in a surreal glow. "We can't stay here," Riley shouted over the hum. Cole grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. "Move." As they fled, the artifact emitted a final, deafening pulse. Cole turned just in time to see the containment vessel crack, releasing a wave of energy that rippled through the tunnel. When they emerged above ground, the air was thick with an electric charge. Townspeople stood in the streets, looking dazed. Some clutched their heads, while others pointed to the sky, where strange lights danced like living things. Cole turned to Ethan, his face grim. "This isn't just a local problem anymore. If we don't stop it, it's going to spread." Ethan nodded. "Then we stop it. Whatever it takes." At the sheriff's office, the group regrouped to share their findings. Elena showed the blueprint of the tunnels, while Riley explained what she had seen in the artifact's containment system. "It's not just a source of energy," Riley said. "It's alive, and it's reaching out." "Reaching for what?" Elena asked. Riley hesitated. "Not what. Who. It's trying to connect with something, or someone, and if it succeeds, we're all in danger." The realization hit them all at once. The artifact wasn't just a relic of the past. It was a key, and the circle was trying to use it to unlock something far more dangerous. As the tremors grew stronger and the artifact's influence spread, Cole knew they had little time left. The circle's plan was reaching its climax, and the fate of Cedar Creek, and possibly the world, hung in the balance. By dawn, Cedar Creek was no longer the quiet town it had always been. The artifact's energy was seeping into every corner, transforming more than just the land beneath it. Whispers of unseen voices filled the air, and strange lights flickered in the sky, defying explanation. People who had once dismissed such phenomena as fantasy now clung together, their fear of the unknown forging an unspoken unity. At the sheriff's office, Cole Daniels stood at the center of a hastily convened meeting. Ethan Drake and Deputy Jessica Moore were at his side, along with Elena Carter, Riley, and a growing crowd of townspeople. The room buzzed with tension, a mix of fear and determination in every face. "I know this is hard to believe," Cole began, his voice steady but urgent. "But the artifact buried beneath this town isn't just a relic. It's something far more powerful and far more dangerous. The people behind this, the Circle, are trying to use it for their own gain. If they succeed, it's not just Cedar Creek at risk. It's everything." The crowd murmured uneasily. A man in the back raised his hand. "What exactly are we dealing with here, Daniels? Magic? Science? Something else?" Cole hesitated, glancing at Elena. She stepped forward, clutching the mining ledger. "It's hard to explain," But the artifact is alive in a way we can't fully understand. It doesn't think or feel the way we do, but it responds to energy, to intent. The miners in 1945 tried to contain it because they knew releasing it could be catastrophic. Now, the circle is breaking that containment. Riley took over. They're using the Iron Fangs and mercenaries to keep us distracted while they complete their work underground. But they didn't count on us fighting back. Ethan stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of his badge. This isn't just about them anymore. This is about us. About protecting our town, our families, and our future. If we stand together, we can stop them. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment sinking in. Then, from the back of the room, Sarah Blake, the owner of the hardware store, stood. What do you need us to do? The plan was simple in its structure but bold in its execution. Cole and Ethan would lead a strike team into the tunnels to confront the circle directly and disrupt their operations. Riley would guide them, using her insider knowledge of the circle's methods. Meanwhile, Elena and Jessica would organize the townspeople into defensive groups to protect Cedar Creek from any retaliation by the Iron Fangs or the mercenaries. Local veterans and business owners volunteered to lead these groups, their resolve unshaken despite the strange phenomena surrounding them. Mike Parker, the town's maintenance supervisor, offered his knowledge of Cedar Creek's infrastructure. The utility tunnels run parallel to the mining system, he explained, spreading out an old map on the sheriff's desk. They're deep enough to bypass most of their security. I can guide one team while the others focus on the main entrances. The plan came together quickly, and by mid-morning, the town was mobilizing. Small businesses donated supplies, flashlights, batteries, first aid kits. Farmers brought trucks to create blockades on key roads. Families offered their basements as shelters for children and the elderly. Cole watched it all unfold with a mix of pride and urgency. For the first time since his arrival, Cedar Creek wasn't a town on the verge of collapse. It was a community ready to fight. As the strike team prepared to descend into the tunnels, Elena approached Cole, her expression filled with both fear and determination. "Promise me you'll come back," she said softly. Cole placed a hand on her shoulder. "I promise. But no matter what happens, you keep the kids safe. This town needs you, Elena." She nodded, swallowing her fear, and stepped back as Cole joined Ethan and Riley at the tunnel entrance. The descent was tense. The deeper they went, the more the air seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. The tunnel walls were alive with glowing symbols, shifting and twisting like living things. "This place feels wrong," Ethan muttered, his flashlight casting eerie shadows. "It's not wrong," Riley said. "It's alive. The artifact's energy is waking it up, and we're in the middle of it." They reached the central chamber, where the circle's operations were in full swing. Victor Grayson stood near the artifact's containment vessel, barking orders at his mercenaries. The vessel pulsed with light, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. Cole motioned for his team to spread out. "We can't let them finish. If that thing gets loose, we're done." As Riley moved to disable the containment grid, Cole and Ethan engaged the mercenaries. The fight was brutal and chaotic, gunfire echoing through the chamber as the artifact's light intensified. "Stay down," Ethan shouted, ducking behind a crate as bullets ricocheted around them. Cole advanced, taking out two mercenaries with precise shots. He reached Grayson, who turned to face him with a cold smile. "You're too late, Daniels," Grayson said. "The artifact is already responding. You can't stop it now." Cole lunged, tackling Grayson to the ground. The two men grappled, the energy from the artifact distorting the air around them. Nearby, Riley worked frantically at the controls. "I need more time," she shouted. "We don't have time," Cole yelled, landing a punch that sent Grayson sprawling. The artifact emitted a deafening hum, and the chamber shook violently. The glowing symbols on the walls flared brighter, casting the room in an otherworldly light. "Get out of there!" Elena's voice crackled through their radios. "The tremors are spreading across town." Cole looked at Riley. "Can you shut it down?" She shook her head. "It's too late to shut it down completely, but I can redirect the energy, give the town a fighting chance." "Do it," Cole said, his voice resolute. Above ground, the townspeople fought to hold their lines. The Iron Fangs, realizing they were losing control, launched a desperate assault on Main Street. But the townspeople were ready. Sarah Blake led a group armed with makeshift barricades and fire extinguishers, holding the bikers at bay. Mike Parker used his knowledge of the utility tunnels to cut off their reinforcements. Despite the chaos, the people of Cedar Creek stood firm. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for each other. In the chamber below, Riley redirected the artifact's energy, channeling it into the containment grid. The light grew blinding, and the tremors reached a crescendo. "Move!" Cole shouted, grabbing Riley and Ethan as the chamber began to collapse. The team barely made it out before the tunnel caved in behind them, sealing the artifact and the Circle's plans beneath the earth. When the dust settled, Cedar Creek was battered but unbroken. The artifact's energy had subsided, and the strange phenomena had faded. The Iron Fangs were defeated, and the mercenaries had fled. At the sheriff's office, Cole and Ethan regrouped with Elena and the others. Riley confirmed that the containment grid was holding, for now. "We bought ourselves time," she said, "but this isn't over. The Circle will regroup, and the artifact is still dangerous." Cole nodded. "Then we stay ready. Cedar Creek isn't just a town anymore. It's a line in the sand." As the sun rose over Cedar Creek, its people emerged from their homes, battered but victorious. They had faced the unknown and stood together, proving that even in the face of unimaginable danger, unity could prevail. But deep underground, the artifact's faint glow remained, a reminder that some battles were only just beginning. The collapse of the tunnels had brought a temporary calm to Cedar Creek. The tremors had stopped, and the strange lights in the sky had faded. But deep down, everyone knew this was the calm before the storm. The artifact wasn't destroyed. Its glow beneath the earth was merely hidden, waiting for the next move. At the sheriff's office, Cole Daniels, Elena Carter, Sheriff Ethan Drake, Riley, and their closest allies gathered to plan their final stand. The room was packed with maps, notes, and printouts from Riley's stolen files, every detail pointing to one conclusion. The Circle wasn't done yet. "They're regrouping," Riley said, pointing to a map of Cedar Creek. "Their mercenaries are consolidating near the industrial site. Victor Grayson isn't the type to cut and run. He'll push harder now that he's cornered." "Why risk it?" Deputy Jessica Moore asked. "They've lost control of the artifact. What's left for them to gain?" Elena answered, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "Because they believe the artifact can still be harnessed. They think they can control it, even after everything that's happened. And they're willing to destroy the town to prove it," Cole added. Ethan rubbed his temples. "If they finish whatever they're planning, what happens to Cedar Creek?" Riley hesitated before answering. "At best, the town becomes collateral damage. At worst, the artifact's energy destabilizes reality itself. This isn't just about Cedar Creek anymore. This is about what happens if the Circle succeeds." The room fell silent as the gravity of her words sank in. Finally, Cole spoke, his voice firm. "Then we don't let them succeed. We end this now." The plan was set in motion by nightfall. Cole, Ethan, and Riley would lead a strike team back into the tunnels to confront Grayson and stop his operation once and for all. Meanwhile, Elena and Jessica would coordinate the town's defenses, rallying the citizens to hold off any counterattacks from the Circle's mercenaries and the Iron Fangs. Mike Parker's maintenance crews worked tirelessly to secure access points, setting traps and blocking escape routes to ensure the Circle couldn't slip away unnoticed. "Everything depends on speed," Cole said during the final briefing. "If we don't cut this off at the source, we won't get another chance." The strike team entered the tunnels under the cover of darkness, retracing their steps through the maze-like passages. The air was heavy, thick with the artifact's unnatural energy. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the distant hum emanating from deep within the earth. Riley stopped to examine a section of the wall, her flashlight casting eerie shadows. "The artifact is stabilizing," she whispered. "They've rebuilt part of the containment grid. It's keeping the energy focused." "Focused on what?" Ethan asked. "On opening the door," Riley replied grimly. They pressed on, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. When they reached the central chamber, The sight that greeted them was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. The artifact, now fully exposed, floated in the air, encased in a lattice of energy that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Around it, Grayson's mercenaries worked feverishly, connecting wires and calibrating machinery. Victor Grayson stood at the center, overseeing the operation with a cold determination. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Grayson said without turning around, his voice echoing in the chamber. "A power beyond comprehension, waiting to be unlocked. And you think you can stop it?" Cole stepped forward, his weapon drawn. "We're not here to argue, Grayson. Step away from the artifact, and no one else has to get hurt." Grayson chuckled, turning to face them. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about destruction. It's about evolution. The artifact is a gateway, a chance to reshape reality itself. The Circle's vision is bigger than this town, bigger than all of us." Ethan raised his gun. "You're not reshaping anything, Grayson. Shut it down, or we'll do it for you." Grayson's calm demeanor faltered, his eyes narrowing. "You can't stop it. The process has already begun." With a snap of his fingers, Grayson signaled his mercenaries to attack. The chamber erupted into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the tunnels as Cole, Ethan, and Riley fought to hold their ground. The mercenaries were well trained, but Cole's military experience gave him an edge. He moved with precision, taking down enemies one by one. Ethan covered Riley as she worked her way to the artifact's control panel. "I can disrupt the containment field," she shouted over the noise. "But it's going to get worse before it gets better." "Do it," Cole yelled, dodging a burst of gunfire. Riley's fingers flew over the controls, bypassing security protocols and rerouting power. Sparks flew as the containment grid faltered, and the artifact pulsed with a blinding light. Grayson shouted, his voice filled with panic. "No, you'll destroy everything." "That's the idea," Riley muttered. The ground shook violently, and the symbols on the walls flared to life. The artifact's energy surged, filling the chamber with a deafening hum. Cole grabbed Riley's arm. "We've got to move." "What about Grayson?" Ethan asked, glancing at the man who had fallen to his knees, his face illuminated by the artifact's glow. Cole hesitated. "Leave him. He made his choice." Above ground, the battle for Cedar Creek raged on. The Iron Fangs and the Circle's remaining forces launched a desperate assault on the town, but the citizens were ready. Sarah Blake led a group of defenders on Main Street, their makeshift barricades holding firm against the onslaught. Mike Parker's traps slowed the mercenaries' advance, giving the townspeople time to regroup. Elena worked tirelessly to keep morale high, coordinating efforts from the sheriff's office. "We're not just fighting for survival," she told them. "We're fighting for each other, for our future." Her words ignited a fire in the hearts of Cedar Creek's residents. They fought not out of fear, but out of love for their home. In the tunnels, Cole and his team retreated as the chamber began to collapse. The artifact's energy was out of control, its pulses shaking the very foundations of the earth. They barely made it to the surface before the chamber imploded, sending a shockwave rippling through the town. The ground split open, and a blinding light shot into the sky, illuminating Cedar Creek in an unearthly glow. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The tremors stopped, and the night grew still. When the dust settled, Cedar Creek stood battered but unbroken. The artifact was gone, buried beneath the rubble of the collapsed tunnels. Grayson and his mercenaries were either dead or captured, and the Circle's grip on the town had been shattered. At the sheriff's office, Cole, Ethan, Riley, and Elena regrouped with the townspeople. Exhausted but alive, they embraced the quiet victory. "It's over," Ethan said, his voice heavy with relief. "For now," Riley replied. "The Circle isn't gone. They'll regroup, and they'll come back. But we'll be ready." As the first rays of dawn broke over Cedar Creek, the town's residents emerged from their homes, united by the battle they had fought and won together. They had faced the unimaginable and survived, proving that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the strength of a united community could prevail. Deep beneath the earth, the artifact's faint glow remained, a reminder that the fight for Cedar Creek was just the beginning. The morning after the battle was eerily quiet. The streets of Cedar Creek were littered with debris, the scars of the conflict visible everywhere. Broken barricades lined Main Street, shop windows were shattered, and the faint smell of smoke lingered in the air. But despite the destruction, the town stood. Cole Daniels sat on the steps of the sheriff's office, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Beside him, Sheriff Ethan Drake stared at the horizon, the first rays of sunlight casting long shadows across the battered town. "We won," Ethan said softly. "For now," Cole replied. "But you know this isn't over." Inside the office, Elena Carter worked with Deputy Jessica Moore to catalog the night's events. Citizens trickled in, reporting damages, missing items, and injuries. Despite the chaos, there was a shared sense of relief. Cedar Creek had survived. Riley leaned against a nearby desk, her arms crossed. "The Circle isn't going to let this go," she said. "We just embarrassed one of the most powerful organizations in the country. They'll want revenge. They'll have to get through us first," Elena said, her voice steady. Riley smirked. "You're braver than you look." Elena glanced at her children, Sophie and Max, who were sitting quietly in the corner of the room, drawing on sheets of paper salvaged from a damaged filing cabinet. When you're fighting for your kids, fear isn't an option. By midday, the townspeople began rallying to rebuild. Sarah Blake organized volunteers to clean up Main Street, while Mike Parker led a crew to repair the utility tunnels. The sense of unity that had carried them through the battle now fueled their efforts to restore their home. Cole and Ethan joined a group clearing rubble near the industrial site. As they worked, Cole couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The ground beneath them felt unstable, as if the battle had unsettled more than just the surface. "What's bothering you?" Ethan asked, noticing Cole's unease. "The artifact," Cole said. "Even buried, it's still there. And if it's still active..." Ethan nodded grimly. "Then we're sitting on a ticking time bomb." That evening, Riley called a meeting at the town's community center. Dozens of residents packed into the room, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. "We need to talk about what happened last night," Riley began. "You all know about the artifact, about what the Circle tried to do. But there's something you don't know. That thing, it's not just energy. It's intelligent. And it's still active." Murmurs spread through the crowd. "What does that mean for us?" someone asked. Riley sighed. "It means Cedar Creek isn't safe. Not completely. The artifact's influence doesn't just go away because we buried it. It's still affecting this town." Elena stepped forward. "We've already seen signs of it. Strange dreams, shared memories, things we can't explain. The artifact's energy is still reaching us. But that doesn't mean we're helpless. We need to learn from it," Cole said, his voice cutting through the noise. "The miners in 1945 tried to bury it, and the Circle tried to exploit it. Neither worked. If we're going to protect this town, we need to understand it." The next day, Riley and Elena began studying the artifact's residual effects. They interviewed residents who had experienced unusual phenomena, from vivid dreams to sudden bursts of insight. What they discovered was both fascinating and unsettling. "It's like the artifact is connecting people," Elena said, reviewing her notes. "They're seeing pieces of each other's lives, memories, thoughts. It's not malicious. It's like it's trying to understand us. Or manipulate us," Riley countered. Elena shook her head. "I don't think so. The artifact could have destroyed us last night, but it didn't. Maybe it's not our enemy. Maybe it's just waking up." While Riley and Elena worked, Cole and Ethan returned to the collapsed tunnels. They needed to ensure that the Circle couldn't return and that the artifact remained contained. As they descended into the rubble, the air grew colder, the silence oppressive. The symbols on the walls were faint but still visible, their glow pulsing faintly in time with Cole's heartbeat. "Does it feel stronger to you?" Ethan asked. Cole nodded. "It's like it's watching us." They reached the central chamber, or what was left of it. The artifact was no longer visible, buried beneath tons of rock and debris. But the energy in the air was unmistakable. "This isn't over," Cole said. "Not by a long shot." On their way out, they found a small metallic device, half buried in the dirt. Riley later identified it as a data module, likely left behind by the Circle. "It's encrypted," she said, frowning at her laptop. But if we can crack it, we might find out what they were really planning. As night fell, the people of Cedar Creek gathered in the town square for a candlelight vigil. Despite the fear and uncertainty, there was also hope, a belief that, together, they could face whatever came next. Elena stood with Sophie and Max, watching as the townspeople lit their candles one by one. She thought about everything they had been through, about the battles fought and the sacrifices made. When Cole joined her, she glanced at him and smiled faintly. "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" Cole shook his head. "No, but maybe that's not such a bad thing. Normal didn't stop the circle. Maybe what this town needs is to be something more." As the vigil continued, the ground beneath Cedar Creek seemed to hum softly, as if in response to the unity of its people. The artifact's influence was still there, a quiet reminder of the power it held. But for now, the town was at peace. And as the candles flickered in the night, the people of Cedar Creek knew they had found something stronger than fear: hope. The weeks after the battle transformed Cedar Creek in ways no one could have predicted. The scars of the conflict remained: damaged buildings, roads torn apart by tremors, and the lingering memories of a night when everything changed. Yet, amidst the rubble, the town found its footing, evolving into something stronger, something more united. Cole Daniels had planned to leave Cedar Creek once the dust settled. He'd told himself his role was temporary, a soldier stepping in to help a town in need. But as he stood on the repaired steps of the sheriff's office, watching the townspeople rebuild their lives, he realized that leaving was no longer an option. Cedar Creek had become his fight, his home. Sheriff Ethan Drake approached him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You know, Daniels," he said, handing over one of the cups, "we could use someone like you on the force." Cole raised an eyebrow. "Are you offering me a badge?" "Call it a trial run," Ethan replied with a grin. "You've already been doing the job. Might as well make it official." Cole took a sip of the coffee, nodding thoughtfully. "I'll think about it." Elena Carter, meanwhile, had become the heart of Cedar Creek's recovery. The library became a hub of activity, not just for research and education, but for understanding the strange, subtle changes the artifact had left behind. The dreams and shared memories continued, but instead of fear, the townspeople began to approach these phenomena with curiosity. Elena organized community forums where residents could share their experiences, fostering a sense of connection and understanding. "It's not just the artifact affecting us," she told a gathering one evening. "It's how we choose to respond to it. We can let it divide us, or we can let it bring us closer." Her words resonated, and the people of Cedar Creek began to embrace their newfound awareness, using it to strengthen their bonds rather than tear them apart. Riley remained a key player in Cedar Creek's defense, though her focus shifted from fighting to preparation. She worked with Mike Parker to map the town's infrastructure, identifying vulnerabilities and ensuring they could respond to any future threats. She also continued to decode the data module Cole and Ethan had recovered from the tunnels. After weeks of effort, she finally cracked it, uncovering a trove of information about the Circle's global operations. "They're bigger than we thought," Riley told the group during a late-night meeting at the sheriff's office. "This wasn't just about Cedar Creek. They've been searching for artifacts like this all over the world. And they're not done." Cole leaned forward, his expression serious. "Do they know the artifact here is still active?" Riley nodded. "They know, and they'll come back for it eventually." Ethan sighed. "Then we'll be ready. Cedar Creek isn't the same town they tried to push around." The artifact itself remained buried, but its influence was undeniable. The strange hum beneath the town persisted, subtle but ever-present. Scientists and researchers arrived, drawn by reports of the phenomena, but the townspeople were cautious, refusing to let outsiders exploit their home again. Elena worked closely with Riley and Ethan to establish guidelines for how the artifact's energy would be studied and managed. "This isn't just about protecting Cedar Creek," she said during a meeting with the town council. "It's about making sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. The artifact isn't ours to control, it's ours to understand." The council agreed, and Cedar Creek became a place of cautious exploration, where science and community worked hand in hand to navigate the artifact's mysteries. One evening, as the sun set over the rebuilt town, Cole found himself back at the industrial site. The tunnels were sealed, and the land above them had been turned into a memorial park. A simple plaque stood at its center, bearing the names of those who had fought and sacrificed to protect Cedar Creek. Elena joined him, her children, Max and Sophie, running ahead to play on the new swings. "They seem happy," Cole said, watching the kids laugh and chase each other. "They are," Elena replied. "For the first time in a long time, I think we all are." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the artifact faint but steady beneath their feet. "Do you ever think about leaving?" Elena asked. Cole shook his head. "Not anymore. This town, it's different now. Stronger. It's where I'm supposed to be." Elena smiled. "I'm glad you stayed. We couldn't have done this without you." As night fell, Cedar Creek came alive with the sounds of laughter and conversation. The streets were lit with strings of lights, and families gathered in the square for an impromptu celebration. Sarah Blake manned a grill, flipping burgers for anyone who wanted one, while Mike Parker told stories about the town's history to a group of children. Even Riley, usually reserved, joined the festivities, a rare smile on her face. Ethan raised a glass of lemonade, calling for quiet. "To Cedar Creek," he said, his voice carrying across the square. "To the people who fought for it, the people who saved it, and the people who make it home." The crowd cheered, raising their glasses in unison. As the celebration continued, Cole stood at the edge of the square, watching the town he had come to call home. He knew the battle wasn't truly over. The circle would return, and the artifact's mysteries were far from fully understood. But for now, Cedar Creek was safe. Its people were united, its strength undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, Cole Daniels felt a sense of peace. Deep beneath the earth, the artifact pulsed faintly, its energy blending with the life above. It wasn't a threat, not anymore. It was part of Cedar Creek now, a reminder of what the town had endured and what it had become. Somewhere in the depths of the tunnels, ancient symbols shifted one last time, their glow fading into the darkness as if acknowledging the choice that had been made. Cedar Creek had found its place, not just in the world, but in the fabric of something far greater. The town's story wasn't over. It was just beginning.